Thank you very much. I'm Jean. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Springy, and Hugo is one of our analysts within our team overall.
Hello.
Just a few words on Springy. So who we are, for the ones who don't know us. Today we're a team of 70 people spread between the United States. We have an office in Austin and Houston, an office in London and Paris, and we're opening an office in Singapore around the next week. Our clients are worldwide. We work for charters, but also for vessel managers and equipment providers. And I think what we believe in is we try to get the best data scientists and web developers because they don't usually come from the maritime industry, unfortunately. I have a mathematical background for myself, and we try to mix them with people who know the industry extremely well, maritime or the offshore industry. And so that enables us to leverage the best algorithms overall. So just a few examples. For example, in the offshore industry, we track around 14,000 vessels worldwide, going from offshore rigs, construction vessels, DSVs, OSVs, CTVs, you can name them. And we use the best algorithm possible to understand for each vessel, what is she doing, who is she working for, what's her performance overall, based on the data we have. Of course, the more data, the better we are with our algorithms. So we use algorithms like natural language processing, pattern recognitions, predictive algorithms, to understand exactly what the vessel are doing. And today we have two main products. One is market intelligence, which is solely based on publicly available data. It enables us to show our client what we're able to do with data, and it's just public data. People usually say it's free. Well, no, it's not free because it's publicly available data. There's a lot of science put in that to make sure that we get the insights. And then we have smart field management, where we do the same, but now on private data of our clients, and so where we work with them to get more insights based on their own data. So we're going to run you through the presentation. First, we're going to give you an overview of the offshore vessels, how we see them. We have multiple discussions how diverse is the offshore industry, but it's important to bucket them into some kind of families. So we did our own bucketing, and we did a model to evaluate how much is the offshore industry emitting. Usually people look at one vessel per vessel, but that's at the end we're a whole industry, and we need to know how these emissions evolve over time. And so then we're going to deep dive into the IMO strategy and what does it mean for the offshore industry. We'll be a bit more higher level than this morning overall. We're not lawyers, so we'll give our point of view. And then we're going to show you a bit what is happening also in the industry. There's some very good use cases around happening, with some good benefits for decarbonization in terms of alternative fuels, battery systems overall. And then we will finish with our approach, what we think needs to happen. There's really three levers if we want to simplify it, and how does that come into time overall down the road. I'll hand it to Hugo for the rest.
Thank you. Let's jump into offshore vessels. So, as being said this morning, the offshore vessel industry is a really vast and complex world with up to 10,000 vessels and more than 20 specialized vessel type. It ranges from crew transfer operation to heavy lift operations with turbine installation or pipe laying or even wreck removal. The largest fleet, let's say, is the support fleet covering PSV, SOVs, or anchor handlers, for example, and approximately 60% of the global fleet. The offshore vessel industry have emitted 35 million of ton CO2 equivalent in 2023. At Spinrgy, we tried to modelize at the first attempt the offshore vessel fuel consumption and thus CO2 emissions. This model is based on a bottom-up approach and an 8-year historical activity mode data. So for transit activities, DP or at quay activity, and specific vessel characteristics such as the vessel type that you have seen just before, engine propulsion systems, deadweight tonnage, or LOA. We can see here that the offshore industry emission are still growing. It has increased 20% since 2020, so since the COVID crisis. And so we're looking at a very dynamic industry, and despite all the efforts, the emissions are still growing faster as the number of associated vessel days. But we're all here today, and we're all agreed that all the actors needs to take action to inverse the global trend. So last year, the MEPC 80 closed on an historic agreement to reach net zero by 2050. It has been said before, with two indicative checkpoints, 30% reduction by 2030 and 70% reduction by 2040. And since January 2024, the global shipping industry has been introduced into the EU ETS system, meaning that vessel owners need to pay for what they emit, to be a bit simple. On the offshore vessel side, there are no firm regulation on GHG emissions, but all the offshore industry agree to reduce emission and that they must participate in global shipping initiatives. So in the IMO global GHG strategy, for example. On regional regulation, the offshore industry will have to report their emission in the EU MRV system by 2025 and pay for their emission by 2027 with the EU ETS systems. To jump on two other market forces, we're still seeing some improvement on the charterers and vessel owner side. Charterers are willing to contract greener vessels to reduce their scope emission and have better operations. And we're also seeing the external pressure from regulatory bodies with the introduction of non-price criteria in offshore tenders. It has been the case in the latest offshore wind auction with the example of France, Netherlands, and Norway. On the vessel owner side, we're seeing and we identify that more and more vessels are publishing sustainability reports with disclosed emission in it. So vessel owners are starting to report their fleet emission, and it starts to become the norm. I think this is really the first step towards decarbonization, because of course you can't reduce what you can't measure. And again, vessel owners have also disclosed clear net zero targets, sometimes even more ambitious than IMO's. So we can see here, and this is also that what we have learned before, that all the stakeholders of the industry are really willing to reduce their emission and are pushing toward that. To simplify, we can identify three main levers to for decarbonizing offshore fleets. The first one is improving your operational efficiency. It usually starts by the digitalization of your operation, and can lead to better marine coordination, fuel consumption benchmarking, or even crew training. It can be considered as a short-term measure. The next one is equipment upgrade. Here it references all the equipment that can be directly installed on board your vessel. There is hybrid systems, so we've seen many examples of battery packs installed on board ships, or a shore power connection system. And I wanted to quote also the wind assisted propulsion. This is an innovative system at the pilot stage in the global shipping industry. But with this system, we're really seeing that the maritime industry is always looking for new answers and always looking to push the boundaries to reduce emissions. So we are really in a dynamic industry here. And last but not least, the alternative fuel, the subject of many conversation, covering LNG, biofuel, methanol, ammoniac, and hydrogen. Of course, to use those fuel, you need a strong supply chain and specific engine capabilities. And again, you need to source the fuel production from renewables to make sure of the environmental benefits. and this is the longest term measure. Having that being said, Spinergy identified 150 vessels dual fuel capable in the offshore vessel market, currently either being delivered or already announced. 1/3 of them are LNG capable. The LNG has a really strong penetration rate into the PSV segment, and we're seeing a few new builds announcements that will be using LNG. About methanol and hydrogen, all the latest announcements are coming from the offshore wind support industry, so mainly SOVs and CTVs. So despite all of these announcements, we're seeing that with all of these announcements, we're seeing that vessel owners are really trying to prepare themselves for the use of alternative fuel. So even if the supply chain is not maybe strong enough currently, many vessel owners are preparing themselves to be ready for the future. And of course, the use of alternative fuel need some regulatory approval from Classification Society. And currently, 7 vessels have received specific alternative fuel notations. So here I'm excluding LNG and biofuel. So from DNV and LODS. Another technology I want to talk about is a hybrid battery system. So the energy storage system that can be directly installed on board the vessels. If we look at the graph of the annual ESS installation up to 2024, we can see a real shift in 2018 with the first conversions of battery packs. And we can also identify a slight slowdown last year, so in 2023, but we can expect the number to increase again in the coming future. When we look at the green bars, so for the new builds, we are seeing that energy storage systems are really becoming let's say the norm for new builds, and vessel owners are pushing for ESS directly on board. But all of these solutions have it's really hard to evaluate each efficiency, and I let Jean to conclude.
Thank you. So we did see that there's 3 different levers. What's quite complex is for every time we engage with different clients, there's always what kind of vessel type, and that's coming back to the complexity of the offshore industry because there's so many types of vessels. It also depends on what the vessel is doing and its utilization level, because that's going to also dictate a bit the kind of solution or that you want to put in place overall. The originality, if you're operating in West Africa, or if you're operating in the North Sea, or Asia, or North America, it's radically different also on what you can do overall down the road. And all the companies we're talking about are profit-oriented, of course. So there's always a question of cost and profit, and how can you, who's going to be paying for that? So our vision quite over here is, which is quite important, is to start by measuring as much as possible. Like we said, what you can't measure, if you can't measure it, you're not going to be able to reduce it. And we're a big fan of saying you need to look at your carbon emission by activity mode. And I think this is the key message we're trying to really push down the industry, because if you don't look at by different activities, you're not going to be able to compare it. You're not going to be able to reduce your emissions down the road. And so, for example, if you look at the offshore vessel, I mean, there's 3 main activity modes. There's going to be potentially ashore and transit and DP. Potentially, you can say drifting as another one. And so, just by making those big categories, then you're going to be able to look at your emissions. And the first thing you're going to do is to be able to benchmark vessels. Once again, people are going to say, oh, benchmarking can be quite easy. Well, not always, because we're going to take 2 vessels that are not potentially in the same environment. And so here, there's a lot of work on making sure that you standardize the weather operating conditions, for example, wind, wave, or current eventually, to make sure that you're going to be able to compare vessels to understand how do they perform. And every time we've done it, Even on the same vessel, you just compare the crews, or you compare to similar sister vessels, or you compare vessels that are a bit more different, but you kind of have an algorithm to normalize the performance. It's incredible how much benefits you can see. Clearly, some operational benefits, some activities, behaviors that can be changed down the road. And then what we also strongly suggest, in our view, is it needs to be specific, targeted down the road. There's a lot of solutions, there's a lot of ways of reducing emissions, but trying to quantify and to be targeting. The most obvious one is, like, for example, power to shore, making sure that you understand your emissions for every vessel at every K that which you're putting, how much does that represent, and how much would that be a business case to invest into a power to shore for a specific K. And then as soon as you have all your understanding on how much emissions you're having per activity, per vessel in different cases, that's when you're going to be able to create a business case to invest in new technologies or alternative fuel to reduce your emissions and make sure that you keep track of those objectives down the road. So I think that was a bit our last slide. So we're clearly working on this. It's something we are truly interested in working on. We're helping our clients. We're like Ian saying, we're working with IMCA. We're working with other also body organizations to help our clients understand their emissions and drive the industry towards less emissions down the road.